Based on the themes of identity and youth subculture, this video essay will use the success of the rock song Q-加州Man by Unimportant Youth Society as a case study to evaluate its effectiveness as a youth subculture in resisting the dominant culture. The background of the song's lyrics is China's economic reform from a planned economy to a market economy in the 1990s. It represents the scene of a factory worker returning home after losing his job, as well as his feelings of loss and anger as a dominated working class. With its distinctive rock style, the song presents a symbolic challenge to the dominant socialist culture. Here, the socialist culture and the rock culture construct their own identities through mutual otherness. Significantly, in the age of the Internet, rock culture is gradually incorporated into mainstream culture. The success of this rock band also reinforces the image of a free society, which in turn consolidates hegemony. Nevertheless, the subculture has always represented a spirit of rebellion which could be seen as a critical intellectual force. It can also provide key value to cultural studies that, in a given social context, how social structures and individuals interact and clash through ideologies as the mass media change. Chinese youth born in the 1980s received an idealistic education, but the social inequalities of China's economic reform placed them into a discontinuous discursive space from family to society, which create a conflicting identity in their transition from childhood to adulthood. Therefore, as specialized professions and adult roles emerge in society, they need a space for cultural transformation to resolve this contradiction. Influenced by American rock culture, Chinese youth resist this dominant semantic order through pursuing different identities and develop a distinctive rock style. Thus, rock culture is able to emerge in China. In order to maintain the rule, the Chinese government sought to make socialist culture the dominant ideology. In the cultural sphere, this ideology has brought norms to music and film, resulting in the high unity of art and politics, which inhibits pluralistic ideas. For example, in China's 1990s, lyrical and tender songs were the dominant style of musical composition. For altruism and social constructionism, it is also the process by which ideology achieves subjectivity construction by the interpolation of individuals. In other words, the Chinese government disseminates ideology through technologies of power, which conceals the underlying relationship of exploitation and produces a normative and disciplined moral discourse among the Chinese youth individuals, thus enabling them to regulate themselves and making socialist culture a principle of survival. I will use the socialist concept of the sign to analyze the presentation of the rock subculture and the identifying process of Chinese youth. This could be divided into two aspects, content and form. In terms of content, the rockers' distinctive clothes and frantic reasons constitute a set of rock signs that represent a symbolic challenge to the dominant symbolic order. On the other hand, it elevates the disruption of the social order, which is usually seen as a crime, to an art form. According to Hall, this art form leaves space for the Chinese youth decoding. Therefore, the rock song attracts audiences with its rebellious content and novel art form, and facilitating the spread of the values it represents. Here, according to Foucault, Chinese youth position themselves into the discourse of rock symbols through technologies of the self, which is a becoming process of understanding the identities. As is mentioned above, the technologies of power and the technologies of self respectively construct a youth's social identity and self-identity. The reader points out that the identity of rock youth is always constituted on the basis of the exclusion of mainstream discourses. As Hebdike argues, Chinese youth rock culture creates a subcultural landscape by creating a unique, dangerous, and cool style, which is a set of discourses, in contrast to the dominant culture. Here, according to Foucault, the identity of rock youth is produced as a resistance effect within the hegemonic structure of Chinese dominant culture. Rock culture is therefore a subculture. Finally, we can see that the issue is there a possibility of identity mobility for youth in the age of Internet? After the release of this song, the band becomes famous among Chinese youth groups. This demonstrates the possibility of social mobility and reinforces the image of a free society, thus further consolidating hegemony. Moreover, in recent years, the Internet changed subculture's initial role. MacArthur mentioned in his journal article that Chinese rock youth appear on the Internet as geeks, where the mainstream culture incorporates subcultures by the commercial distance of capital and social ideology. Firstly, the rise of music streaming platforms transforms rock symbols into commodities and stripped them from their initial context. Secondly, Chinese dominant class re-ideologizes the resistance in rock culture. As a result, most youth listeners don't realize that the rock culture was a rebellion against the superstructure. This allows rock culture to exist as trivial everyday life. Therefore, youth appear to find relative autonomy for themselves to survive, and with more power to express their own thoughts. However, in fact, these acts are placed within the ruling structure of meaning. Thus, Hebdike argues that subcultures do not transcend the circuit of culture. However, from a post-structuralist point of view, the resistance of subcultures is strategic, which is in a position of structural defense. This shows that subculture has a certain discursive power in the structure of confrontation with dominant culture. In conclusion, Chinese youth see the possibility of identity mobility through the Internet, but as individuals, they are still part of the hegemonic structure. As is quoted by Halprin, resistance to power takes place from within power. It is part of the total relations of power. However, as a subculture, rock culture has always represented the rebellious spirit and the identity of rock youth. In addition, Bennett supports that in the age of the Internet, the identity of young individuals is more of a mobile lifestyle. In other words, as two aspects of culture, both socialist culture and rock culture play an important role in the cultural life of Chinese youth. This brings different styles of cultural enjoyment to the audience and also possesses a certain value of cultural innovation.
傍晚6点下班，换掉要长的衣裳。妻子在澳洲，我去喝几瓶啤酒。如此生活30年，直到大厦崩塌，云层深处的黑暗啊，淹没心底的景观。在八角柜台，疯狂的人民商场，用1张假钞买1把假枪，包围他的生活，直到大厦崩塌，夜幕覆盖华北平原，忧伤浸透他的脸。河北师大附中，乒乓少年背向我，沉默的注视，无法离开的教室，生活